We got her in this care home, and the care home were absolutely first class. And these people were very, very good. They were very understanding. They treated her as a person, as opposed to somebody who just come in there for palliative care and probably won't be there for much longer. They treated myself, my sister, and my two brothers with total respect and care. We felt that she was part of that home, even though she'd only gone in there because basically she was getting near the end of life. They were second to none. Again, they had lots of other people there, but at no point were we just made to be a number. We were people, we were family, we were there to be looked after. They did everything for my mother and everything for us as a family.
So she went in on the 8th of July this year. I wasn't happy really that the carers were saying she was fine when really I didn't think she was. I felt in my own clinical judgment that she was nearing the end of life. So I got in touch with the community matron and asked her if she could go in to review her. So later that day, the community matron rang me back and said, Trisha, I'm really sorry to tell you, yes, she was right with what you were thinking. She is now end of life. And I said, well, yeah, if now you've classed her as being end of life, obviously I've not been able to go in to visit her due to COVID, but there is different government guidelines now. She's classed as being end of life. I did speak to the manager and she point blankly said, no, I couldn't go in and see her due to COVID restrictions. You know, I wasn't very happy that I'd actually sort of like made the diagnosis of my nana being end of life, having to get the community matron in to clarify that, and then also being told that I can't visit her when she's end of life now. And then I was allowed to go in for 30 minutes per day as told by the manager. And I didn't find it very friendly when I did go to the home, because I was ringing when I was in the car park, telling them that I was there. I was told to go to a different door, not into the main entrance. And obviously, because she'd tested positive with COVID, I was going in all PPE'd up. So one carer at the bottom of the steps, another one then at the top of the steps waiting for me. I just felt as though I was doing something wrong. So at the end of life, yes, the district nurses were involved. Now, the carers knew that they had to ring them if she became agitated or in pain. But I felt that when I was going to see her, I found her agitated, of which then I pressed the buzzer for the carers to come and see her. I said, look, she's agitated. Can you ring the district nurses? So I felt as though I were having to prompt them to do that. But whether it's because they've not had no proper training in end-of-life care, they didn't know what to look out for, I don't know. But in my opinion, I felt it were me that were having to tell them to ring the district nurses.
She was in hospital for some weeks due to a fracture in her spine. And then we got her into care home. We had video calls with her, which were awkward because Mum couldn't see and she couldn't hear very well. And then we got a phone call on the Saturday, the 6th of November, to say, could we all go down? My mum was deteriorating and she was end of life. So we went down to the care home, me and my 4 siblings. We were taken to her room. Mum was really ill, and it was very obvious she was end of life. It got to 8 o'clock that night and the nurse said, really, my 3 brothers should leave. We couldn't all stay, which we accepted. So they said the goodbyes. Me and my sister stayed overnight on the Saturday night. We stayed all day Sunday, all Sunday night. Then Monday morning, the managers came in and everything changed. Up until then, the staff had been absolutely brilliant, so caring, compassionate, showing respect, dignity. They looked after us. And then Monday morning, when the management came back in, as I say, it all changed. They kept coming up to my mum's room saying that had been in touch and said we must go home. We weren't allowed to be there because of COVID and the risk. My argument was my mum was end of life. She could have gone at any time. And the risk, I couldn't understand the risk because we were all masked up in PPE. My mum was laid dying. There was no way we went out of the room because we didn't want to leave my mum. It was an ensuite room, so the toilet and bathroom was there anyway. When staff came in, me and my sister actually went and stood in the bathroom, so we weren't close to them. And when they went out, we got hold of my mum's hand again. And then at Monday lunchtime, the manager came up and said that if we didn't leave, they was going to call the police and have us evicted. My sister got very upset, as I did. And I said, I'm not leaving my mum. She's close to death and I don't want her to die on her own. Anyway, she came up and she told me that she'd phoned the police. This was the manager. I've phoned the police and you will be evicted when they come, or even arrested. So I said, will the police be coming up into this room? They said, yes, of course. I said, well, if the police do come, they may show some compassion and understand that by looking at my mum, it was obvious there wasn't long left. All these people coming in and out, telling me that the police were going to be called if I didn't go. It was all going around my mum's deathbed. Instead of it being caring and dying with dignity and respect, this had gone out of the window.
Basically, Mum's been in a care facility since September 2019. It's been a bit of a struggle while she's been in the care home of trying to get things in place. Because she's my loved one, I obviously looked after her, and my care compared to the care in the home is, I would say, totally different. So I think my expectations were high. So sometimes they didn't reach my expectations. So I'd be having like lots of meetings with the care home, with the social worker. And this went on for many, many months. We'd have where it would be hitting the marks and it'd last for a couple of weeks and then we'd go back to where we were. And this just carried on. And then obviously the pandemic struck. We had window visits. And in between, this mum was having falls. Obviously, I couldn't get in. And then they informed me that her mobility wasn't great and that she would have to stay in bed. And I basically said that if you leave mum in bed, she will deteriorate and she'll pass away. And they just said that they weren't able to get her out of bed because it was unsafe for her. So she'd been in bed for a week and they said that they'd have to have a hoist for her. Spoke to the occupational therapist and this had now been 2 weeks that she'd been in bed. And I kept sending emails. I'd also Zoomed to see my mum and she was in bed. I'd been out one night and I got a phone call saying that she'd been sick early hours of the Thursday morning. But they'd not even spoke to me until the Friday evening when they said that she was a little bit better, but I was annoyed the fact that they'd waited 2 days before they actually told me. And then on the Saturday, I'd gone for a meal and then I got a phone call via the pub. They said the ambulance was there and that she looked like she'd had a stroke. So when I got to the ambulance, mum's face was to the side and she was drooling. My brother had said that there was all this hard stuff. And I was like, I thought when she first come in, that was just saliva, you know, just drool coming from her mouth. And when I actually looked and got one of the sticks with the sponge on the end to start wiping around her mouth, I realised it was all pocketed food from when she'd been in the home. So I was absolutely disgusted. So I spent nearly 50 minutes with water, just gently, until I got all this food out of her mouth, until her mouth was clean. And it just made me angry. I thought, is there any wonder she wasn't swallowing if that's what she was doing? And when my mum came into the hospital, she had severe bed sores. So her heels were totally black. So I was angry again, because I said this in my emails: if my mother gets left in bed, she will get pressure sores. And their words were, well, we turn her every 2 hours and 4 hours in the night. And I thought, well, okay. And so for my mum to be that severe with pressure sores within 5 weeks was horrific. This cannot happen again. This cannot happen in care homes where you're kept out of it. And that care home could have done more, not just of looking after my mum, but supporting you actually being able to go to that care home. I really didn't understand why you couldn't see your loved one through the window. But I mean, the way that home was, they did have the capacity to have something built where you could come round the garden on the outside grounds, because the grounds were that big patio doors that they could have put, and they could have wheeled the loved ones in, and you could have easily seen them through them patio. They could have done anything to make things better, and still haven't. And that's what gets me. If you're a good care home, you will do whatever it takes to make sure that those loved ones see the families.
So when I arrived at Dad's care home, which is it falls into the area, yeah, Dad was quite unwell, even though he was sat in the lounge with the other residents. So from the Thursday afternoon, I was really, really fortunate, because of the job that I do within a supported living service myself. We were already receiving tests. So the manager said it was okay for me to stay with Dad. So those were a difficult 2 days. But that is just something that I can never ever thank the home manager enough for, because those were the last 48 hours with my dad. So my heart goes out to the home manager and to the whole team and to our GPs, because they all made that possible. Originally, when Dad had gone into the care home 3 years ago, as a family, I always said I would want Dad to come home here to have his end of life in our home. And I did briefly ask that of the doctor on the Thursday when she rang me. And she said, Jane, I've got to be very, very honest with you. Your dad would not survive a journey, even though it's less than a mile away. And it wouldn't be fair at this stage to move Dad. So that reasoning at that very difficult time, when obviously I couldn't really think straight, that certainly helped. The fact that the manager was doing everything she could in the background, she wasn't coming to me every 5 minutes and saying, oh, this is a problem, you know, we can't get the district nurse for your dad. I was so protected from all the other things that were going on. The staff team, it wasn't just the staff that were on duty. Staff were coming in to see Dad that were off shift, because the manager had contacted them and said, you know, Eric's, you know, not going to be with us for very long. So that, just to get that emotional support was absolutely wonderful. And on the day of his funeral, I've never seen so many people. I think it was just about the whole staff team were outside. As we drove past, everything that happened, it was personal. He had his, you know, everything of his own possessions, his own room that he'd been used to for 3 years. He could still see the trees in the garden that he loved and the birds. All those things were still with him to the end.